Welcome to the next video in the Mega Man series. This is number 18 on cutscenes and timelines to give a cinematic storytelling experience in your game. So in this video, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking two approaches. One is going to be an independent scene that's completely animated storyline, and then what we're going to do, and the other part is during gameplay to activate somewhat of a storyline that happens while there's play and then it goes back into the gameplay. So we're going to take a look at doing both ways. So we're going to take a look at the project right now and see what we're going to have at the end of this video. So let's start this up. So that's the animated story that's in the beginning, and we basically are going to take a look at doing some screen fades, music fades, and things like that. So some stuff that we haven't covered yet. Now this is the actual gameplay that we've been working with. And there's nothing new to this. So if you've been following along, you already have this stuff. And there's the camera transition. So what's going to happen is we're going to get to a certain point in this scene, and what's going to happen is the game manager is going to take over. The scene's going to basically play out an animated story inside of here. So once we actually get past this box, we hit a certain X coordinate, and that's what the trigger is. And if I try and hold left, right, nothing, can't shoot, can't jump, keyboard control is disabled. And now I have keyboard control again. So then we're going to go back up here to our checkpoint. And what I've added in this is once we get to the checkpoint, in the previous videos we were able to go back, but now we're locked in, so we can't go backward. So the player has no option but to progress forward. So we're going to be doing a lot of different things in this video. So we're going to switch over to the previous project, and then we're going to get started. So I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So I want to first say that I don't use the Unity timeline tool. So this video does not use the Unity timeline tool whatsoever. I use a different approach, a really, I guess you could say an old school approach. I've tried using the timeline editor. It's like, I guess you could say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I've just gotten used to doing it the old way, and I guess you could say it like it's the harder way. But I don't know, I just like it better because then you're dealing with, you have to, if you're going to do jumps, I don't know, I think you have to use signals, I'm not sure. But we're going to be using an old method of just checking our time in a timeline as the scene progresses, and then call certain functions at those points. And that's basically how we're going to build out our animations. So you'll see what I'm talking about when we get started. First thing I want to do though is we're going to move that out of the way. Now, you don't have to do this. This is just me being a little OCD. We're going to move this after here just so that the code stays in line with what I have uploaded on the on GitHub. So I'm just going to move that, and that's inside of the title scene or the title screen class file that we had for the last video, which was scene transitions. So doing the animations, you don't really need to have the scene transitions, but however, if you want to go from one scene to the next, you should probably get up to speed with video 17 first before you do this. But if you just want to learn how to do a timeline and create a little animated story and all that and not worry about switching scenes, then you don't have to look at number 17. So I just want to say that first. So that's what we're going to do here. And then what we're going to need to do is we're going to go over to our player controller. There are some changes we need to make with that. First thing we're going to do is in our new scene that we're going to be creating, we use our player prefab. And our player prefab, we actually, it's not really, it wasn't a problem at the time, but now it'll be a problem because in our scene that we're going to be creating, we're not going to have an input canvas. And this input canvas has to do with mobile controls. And putting it inside the player controller was probably like a really bad idea. But it's not like a really big deal because this is more like in line being in the game manager. But I'll take care of that later. So for right now, to fix this issue, so once we actually drop the player controller or the player into that scene and we don't have the input canvas, this is actually going to throw a big old error because it's not there, so you can't really set it inactive. So what we're going to do to fix that, just temporarily until we move it out, we're just going to say game object input canvas is equal to this. And then we'll cut that, and then we're just going to check and see if it's null or not. So that's how we fix that. So we're just going to, if we find it, it'll save it in this variable. We're going to check and see if the variable is not null. If it's not null, then we'll set it active. So obviously it found it, so it does exist in your scene. So that's how we're going to fix that. The other thing we're going to do is because we use our player, we need to mimic certain things like being able to move left, move right, and because we're not using the timeline tool to be able to tell it how to do that. So we're going to create some functions. I call them simulation functions. But the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to go into freeze input. And inside of freeze input, when we freeze input, it wasn't a problem before, but now it's going to become a problem because in our story, if we freeze it and the player is holding down the right arrow key or the left, it's going to basically stay stuck on that. We don't want that to happen. So we're going to see if freeze is true. We're going to turn all these internal variables off that we use for keyboard and jump and shoot. So we're going to say key horizontal is going to be equal to 0. Key vertical, which we don't use yet. When we get the ladders and movement up and down, we will. So we're going to set that to 0. And then key jump, which is a Boolean, we're going to set that to false. And then key shoot, we're going to set that to false too, because that's also a Boolean. So when we freeze our input, then we're going to basically say no movement on the keyboard and no button pushing for jumping and shooting. So that'll stop it from being kind of stuck in those states. Then the next thing what we're going to do is we're going to create 5 different functions. We're going to do that at the very bottom after mobile jump. And these are what I call the simulation functions. So these are all going to be public, so we can call them from our player. And first one we're going to call, these is going to be called simulate move stop. And to move stop, what do? Well, the player basically lets go of the keyboard. So that basically, when we press the keyboard right, it's going to save it's going to be 1. If they go left, it's -1. If they don't press anything, it's 0. So to simulate no movement, it's going to be a 0. So we're going to say 0. And we're just going to copy this and we're going to drop it in and just rename them. So we need left and right. So we're going to say move left. If we move left, that's negative. So, and then if we move right, it's +1. If we're going to simulate shooting, okay, so you call this simulate shoot. So if we simulate shooting, then what we're going to do is just call the coroutine to shoot. So we're just going to say start coroutine. And then that's, we called it mobile shoot. I probably should have called it something better. Like, I don't know, but mobile shoot, it's not really I mean, it's technically mobile, but it's, I don't know, we may rename it later, but probably not. It's not that big of a deal. And then we're going to say jump, which actually should have copied this one instead. And this is going to be called, and the reason we call the coroutine is because we can't really call the wrappers because we check for that flag of freezing input. So we just skip that step and we just call the coroutine directly. So these are our functions that we're going to use to be able to move our player around through code. So we're going to simulate being moved, like no more movement, moving left, moving right, simulate shooting, and simulate jumping. And in this video, we're only really using these three to move left, move right, and stop. The shooting ones we can get to maybe in a later video and something else that we end up doing. So that's all we're doing to the player controller. The next one we're going to change is the game manager. So where's the game manager at? Now in the game manager, from video 17, we have these states now. We have a title screen and the main scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to introduce a new one. It's going to be the intro scene. And the intro scene is basically the scene that we're going to be creating. It's going to have the animated story. It's basically self-contained. It has nothing to do with the main one where we look for something to happen and then we animate in there. So this just has to do with the intro scene only. And then we're going to go down to on scene loaded. We're going to add to our switch here. And we're going to do our intro scene that we just added. And in our intro scene, we're going to create a new function in a moment, following the naming conventions we've been using. And then down in the update, we're going to do the same thing. And then this is going to be called intro scene loop. All right, so then we're going to create these. And we're going to do that after the title screen loop. So we're going to say, actually what we could do is we could just technically copy these because it's identical really. And it's not going to be title screen, it's going to be intro scene. And then it's not title screen loop, it's intro scene loop. And then intro scene, da 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 da. So the intro scene is going to lead into the main scene, but the title screen is going to lead into the intro scene. So those are the changes that we're going to be doing. So when the game starts out, it starts on the title screen. And then when they press any key, now we're going to lead into the intro scene. And then when the intro scene is done, we're going to go into the main scene. So, all right, let's see. Then what we need are the functions for telling where we are in a timeline. So to do that, we're going to be doing it in the utility functions file. So one of the videos we created this function, so now we're going to add to this. So these functions are, you're going to pass it, well, let me do the first one actually, we'll talk about it. And first one, we're going to say float runtime float. Then all right, so this is the first one. We actually have, let me see here, There's four of them actually. So this function, this runtime variable that you're going to pass to it, it's going to be, you're going to see when your scene starts or when your animation starts. This runtime is going to be keep on incrementing. It's really, you're taking the current time minus the time that it started, so you'll always see how long it's been running for. So this is, you're going to pass this, and this X time is basically your trigger. This is when you want to see, oh, is it that time? Is it within that time range? So that's basically what this is. And what this is going to do is basically it's just going to check whether or not it's true or false within that time. If it's true, then you're going to execute whatever code you want to happen. Move the player left, move the player right, stuff, et cetera, et cetera. Play music, fade out music, things like that. And so that's all that this function does. And we actually have others like this that we're going to add now. There's actually over a second version of this where we have start time and end time. So this is like, this is one is looking for one specific time. This is going to be looking for a time range. So if it's within a certain time range. And so with this one, it's going to be greater than or equal to start time, and runtime is going to be less than end time. So this is going to check and see whether runtime is within this range. The next one is going to be runtime, or actually this one's going to be called until time. So it's going to be runtime to start time, and then runtime is going to be less than start time. So is runtime less than start time? So until this time. And then the last one, which is called overtime. And then it's end time. And then if its runtime is greater than or equal to end time. So if runtime is over this time, then it'll be true. Otherwise, it's false. So let me double check. Looks like everything looks right. Guess we'll find out when we try it. So those are the time functions. And this method, I saw this probably 10, 15 years ago. It was a really long time ago. I came across the code. I was trying to do like 3D game program when Quake and Unreal Tournament were all popular and everything like that. And I came across, there was a website, Neon Helium, and they used to have contests. And one of the contest entries, which was really cool demo of 3D. And they gave out the source code. I forgot what it was called, but I saw these functions in the source code. And this is how they built out their timeline. So I figured, yeah, it's really cool. So, kind of stealing it, sort of, but no, not really stealing, I'm borrowing it. I don't take credit for these. I take credit for changing it to time.delta time though. But the rest of this is based off of somebody else's work, just these time functions, and how to use them. So that's how I basically build out my timeline too now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and build our scene. So we're going to go over back to Unity. But before we build out our scene, let's just go create another script in our scenes here. It's going to be intro scene. And then we're going to just open it up just to get it ready. All right, there we go. So then we're going to title screen. So the game state, we're going to default the title screen for the title screen. Let's go open up our other scene, the main scene, and change that as well. I don't think I did this in the last video. No, I didn't. So this screen is going to be the main scene. So we can save that. And then we're going to create our new scene here, which is going to be called, where's the scene? There you are. Intro scene. So in our intro scene, let's open that up. Okay, I'm gonna bring this over. So it's a blank, empty scene. So let's take that over real quick. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna import our music file that we're gonna be using and our graphics. The music file I got from OpenGameArt. This is the link right here, RPG music. If you listen to this, it doesn't really blend all that well or mesh that well with our main scene, but this is a demonstration. It's not a final product. So I thought, we'll just use this music. Sounds pretty good with it. So I'm gonna go in here. These are the files that we're gonna use, and you can go get them off of GitHub for Project 18. The link is in the description of the video. So we're gonna drag in this audio for the music. And then in our graphics, we're going to drag in these three. So these I got off of Google Images. There was a bigger sheet that had Dr. Light in it. I just cut him out and made his background transparent in GIMP. And then these two came from Google Image. I didn't make any changes to these. So we're just going to drag those in. And here they are. So for the lab outside, we're going to leave the pixels per unit as 100. We're going to change the filter to no point and no compression so we don't lose anything with it. The inside lab, we're going to change the pixels per unit to 125 and point no filter and no compression. We're going to apply that. And then with Dr. Light, he's basically, he's at 100 also. Point no filter, no compression, apply. So there. Now on our main camera, we change it to a solid color. We're going to make it all black. And we're going to change the size on it to 1.5, I believe. And then what we're going to do is we're going to remove the audio listener because we have that on our sound manager. So it's always going to be there. So we don't need it actually being attached to the camera. So then we're going to create a empty, which we are going to call the same as our scene because unfortunately we're not able to attach scripts to scenes directly. So we're going to have a game object here that'll act as that. And we can reset that. Oops. And we'll just drag that above. And we're going to attach the scene script, intro scene, and when we start coding it, then we'll fill in the values afterwards. Okay. And then we're going to drag in our prefabs. We'll go to the prefabs and then the managers. We're going to put in our game manager and our sound manager. And on our game manager, we're going to set this to the intro scene. Sound manager, we don't make any changes. It's fine the way it is. And now this is where the fun stuff happens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this over. I'm probably going to shrink this down so we can see what's going on here. If I can get the handlebars to show up. So there, we're going to do that. So we're going to do some illusion. Illusion being we're going to take advantage of layers. And the way we're going to have, if you were watching the intro when I was playing it, you saw Mega Man came out of nowhere and he ran into the scene. Well, we're gonna fake that. We're gonna trick it out to do that. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a black background, and then there's gonna be a side panel black background, which Mega Man is gonna be hiding behind. And you're not gonna tell because you think, oh, it's just black bars, right? Well, he's actually gonna be hiding behind one and then run into the scene. So we're gonna trick it. So first thing we're gonna do then is we're going to create a empty called backgrounds because we're going to put all of our backgrounds in here, keep it all organized. I'm going to reset that. And then first thing we're going to do off of backgrounds is we're going to create a child. Well, we'll make it a child. We're going to call it blackback. And you can reset it, and then we're going to drag it onto there. And we're going to add on a sprite renderer. And the sprite we're going to use for this is just going to be the black pixel, which we used before in one of the in the scene transition video. And the layer order is going to be 0 because this is going to be the one that's behind everything. But what we're going to do is we're going to scale it up 10 by 10 so it completely goes way outside of our camera and there's no chance of anything being shown through. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create another child of this, and we're going to call this one, what did we call it? I called it outside lab, because there's going to be basically like two scenes. There's outside his lab, and then when we go inside his lab. So this one we're going to call outside lab. And inside of outside lab, we are going to drag in our graphic for the outside lab. So you're going to go over to graphics, expand your outside lab, and you're going to drag that onto outside lab so it's a child. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to move it a little bit up. So we're going to put it at 0.25. And the rest of these settings on the sprite render are fine. However, except for the order, we're going to change that to 1. So now this layer is on top of the very, very back layer. And so that's it for outside lab, I believe. So then we're going to create another child off the backgrounds. This one's going to be called inside lab. So this is going to be the visual for inside the laboratory. So inside of inside lab, we're going to actually, first we're going to duplicate this because we're going to make a copy, because we're going to, for this blending to work, you can't really blend this with the other one because it doesn't go right. So what we're going to do is we're going to have another black background with that one so that there's black background and so that the middle area blends better. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this. Call it black back, and we're going to put that on inside lab. But the layer order on this one is going to be 2. So now it's covering up the other one. So on side of inside lab, we're going to drag on the inside laboratory picture on top of that. And the position is going to be 0.5, so it's a little bit up, and then we're going to change the layer order to 3. So this is gonna, now this is on there. So then we're going to drag on Dr. Light, add him to the scene. So now Dr. Light's in there. And with Dr. Light, we're going to move him. First, he's going to be on the same layer as Mega Man, so that's layer 10. He's a scale of 1.5 like all the other enemies in Mega Man. The sprites are a little too small. And his position, I've already calculated. So his left is going to be negative 1.108. His Y, which is going to be a really big number because when we add in the ground that Mega Man can run on, he doesn't need a ground because he's not going to have a rigid body attached to him, so he doesn't have any physics. However, Mega Man does. So we're going to have a ground here, and where Mega Man ends up on the ground is where Dr. Light's going to be positioned as well. So they're basically level with each other. So after it runs and everything, it ends up becoming 0.6521805, really big, ugly number. And then, so that's, oops, you know what I forgot to do with him? I forgot to change his pivot. So we'll go back over to Dr. Light and edit him. The other ones we don't care about the pivot, but his pivot is going to be bottom center, just like all the other characters for the most part. Then you can apply them and close that. There, so now he's standing upright. So if you zoom in here, now he's level. So then we're going to duplicate the black background again. But this is technically should have been sitting in here, but I think when I was done, I saw it after the fact, and I was like, it's not. So we're going to put this like down here. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to be calling it black side. So we know it's the side piece. And the position on that's going to be 2.55. The scale on the X is going to be 1. And the Y, we're going to just do it at 5. And the layer for that is going to be layer 11. Now we know Mega Man's on layer 10. This guy's going to be on layer 10, but we're going to put this one on layer 11. So it's right above Mega Man, so Mega Man can be hidden behind here. So that's where the illusion comes in. We can actually drag this out a little bit so it looks a little bit bigger. There. So this is actually, it's right here. You don't see it. It looks like the rest of the black background, but you can see it over here. But this is where the side panel is, and it's covering up on top of it, so it all blends together, no problem. So then what we're going to do is we're going to create the ground. So with the ground, we need to bring this down to a bit. So we're going to create, the backgrounds are done, so now we're going to create a new, oh, that's right. Put it there. Just to keep it in line with what I have uploaded. It technically should have been in here, but I think I forgot to do that, so it's not a big deal. So we're going to create another empty. This one's going to be called ground. This is nothing new. We've done this a million times in previous videos. And then we're going to add on a box collider, 2D. And we're not going to drag it out or anything like that, but if we zoom in here, there's the box right now, and I've already got the values, and they're big, ugly values again, just because of how Mega Man and everything line up. So the X is going to be 0.5077832. The Y is going to be negative 0.7789358. And then the size is going to end up being 5.126441. And then the Y is going to be, where is it at? There it is, 0.2535107. So there's our ground. You can't really, where is it at? You can't see it. It's right there. So here's our ground. Kind of tell it's there. But it's basically this whole area right here, like made it as the ground. And it should extend out here because Mega Man's going to sit outside the scene. He's going to sit right here in the black area. So that's why we made the ground a little bit longer. So he hides outside of the scene, but behind the black panel, which is the illusion because it's all black, like black bars, like a widescreen movie. So then we're going to put in our player. We're going to put Mega Man in there. So we're going to go over to our prefabs and players and drop him in. So there's our player. There's Mega Man right there. We're going to position him first to, he's going to go to 2.45. Let me bring this over so you can kind of see where he's going to end up. So he's right there right now, but his Y is going to be basically the same as Dr. Light's Y, which is negative. And this is actually when he has physics going, this is the number that it ends up being when he's touching the ground. So 0.6521805. So now he's on the ground. And what we're going to do also with him in here is we're going to remove the jump landed clip audio. Sometimes it plays and sometimes it doesn't. And I think it's just because even though he's actually touching the ground, it plays it like he's not touching the ground, which is kind of weird. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the jump command because we don't need it. He's not jumping around in the scene. So we're going to say none on that just so it never plays that audio and remove it. So now he doesn't have that audio clip attached to him anymore. So this is the beginnings of our scene. So if I was to go here to the background, I'm going to say, let's say the inside lab is disabled. Boom, there's our back. And if we bring our inside lab back to the front, this is our inside lab. And we're going to end up transitioning to this through a screen fade. Where actually what we're going to do is we're going to fade out the outside lab or the inside. I can't remember which way I do it. I have to look at the code again. But one of them is going to fade in or out, and it's going to overtake. Let me see here. Because outside lab is on top. So what's actually, I think, going to happen is the inside lab is going to fade in. So we'll see. So what we'll do then is we're going to create the canvas for the text. And our text is going to place, so you play down here in this area below the pictures. So we're going to create a UI canvas. So we're going to add in a canvas. And we don't need that. And then our canvas, we're not going to do anything with this. But what we will do is we're going to, actually I take that back. We're going to change the render mode to scale mode, I'm sorry, not the render mode, to scale with the screen size. So it's always going to be that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add on the text. And this is just regular UI text from Unity. And this is going to be called runtime. And runtime is our way of seeing where we are in the timeline. It's kind of more like for debug purposes. It has nothing to do with the scene as it plays through it, so we can see it as it happens, and if we can see where the time is when we're playing it through, so we can say, okay, maybe we want to move it up a second, and we can see where it was, so we can figure out. Or like in the other part where Dr. Light was flashing, when does he stop flashing? Oh, he stopped flashing at, we'll just say 28 seconds, for instance. So that's where I can give keyboard control back to the player, to the user, so they can move Mega Man around again. So that's basically what the runtime is going to be for. And it doesn't have to be anything special, we're just going to use a regular UI text for that. And so we're going to move the anchor to it on it. You're going to have down Alt, and you're going to put it in the bottom center. And the position, what we're going to do is at 0 and 100. We might want to shrink this down a little so we can see where it's at. There. And then we're going to change the width and the height. So the width is going to be 200, and we're going to leave the height at 30. And on the text, we're just going to put 0.00. And on the color, well, before we get to the color, we're going to change the font. No, the font's fine, but we're going to change it to bold. We're going to say it's 26. There it is right there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put it in the center and in the middle, which is fine. And we're going to change the color to all white. And there it is right there. So this is going to be the runtime right there. We're going to put it right there so we can see it. And then what we'll do is we're going to add a shadow just so that we can see it a little bit better. And on our shadow, we're just going to take out the alpha, just make it all opaque. There. So this is our runtime. It's going to run down so we can see it as it's as the scene's playing through. And this is basically just a debug thing. Okay. So then let me see. Then we're going to add in the Text Mesh Pro, and this is going to be for the actual dialogue between Mega Man and Dr. Light. So we're going to right-click on our canvas here, and we're going to go UI and Text Mesh Pro. And our Text Mesh Pro, we're going to rename that to dialog text. Okay. And then we're going to, let me see here, we're going to anchor that to bottom center as well. So hold down all bottom center, so it's going to be down there. and we're going to change the Y position on that to 50. And then the width, we're going to change to 600. And you can see everything kind of happening over there. Let me just move this over a little bit so you can see a little bit better. And we're going to take out the text for right now. Or actually, we'll just put something on there. Just say that. Doesn't really matter because what's going to be changed throughout the through the animation. Then we're going to come down here. We're going to change our font, and we have the two Megamans, one in the fonts folder and then one in the Text Mesh Pro. And we want the one in Text Mesh Pro because if we ever wanted to use the rich text stuff, we can do that. So we'll just make sure we pick that one for the future. So in case we want to use that in the future. So there's our text. And we're going to change the size to 14. And we're going to, it's already on white, which is good. And then we're going to align it left and top right. And that's pretty much it. And the way we're going to do this is our dialog is going to be inside of the script, and we're just going to see, make sure it looks right. So we're going to say Mega Man. That's going to go down two new lines, then tab in and say, as an example. This is really blurry. There. So this is where our text is going to end up for our dialog down here at the bottom. So that's just what we're going to fill in. We don't want that. We're just going to take that out. And now we have all this. We're going to save. So our scene is built out now with all of our elements and everything. Now we're going to do the script for it. So we're going to go over to the Visual Studio, and we're going to go into the intro scene file, and we're going to create some variables here. But before we create the variables, we need to import some stuff, namespaces. So first what we're going to do is a system, because we use strings, and we use the format function for the time, for the runtime. Then we also use Text Mesh Pro, so we need to use TM Pro. We're going to bring that in, and we also use Unity's plain old text, so we need to use Unity Engine UI for its user interface. Now we can create our variables. So variables that we're going to start out with are two floats. First float is start time. Start time is going to be when our scene started. So we capture the current time and we save it there. And from that point, we'll know how long our scene has been running for. And then we need one called runtime. And runtime is actually going to be current time minus start time over throughout the update process. So we'll know exactly how long our scene has been running for. So we need these two for sure. Next one is going to be a bool, and we've used this before, and this is going to be called next scene. And this is going to be the way that we tell the game manager, hey, bring on the next scene. And what we're going to do in our, I didn't show it in the preview, but we're going to allow the user to press any key to escape out of our animation story, in case they don't want to watch it, which is really sad because we want them to see it, because we put a lot of hard work into building it so that we can show off our abilities. But if they want to get out of it and they don't want to watch it, they can press escape or any other key on the keyboard. And if we added touch, same thing for like mobile, they could tap the screen to get out of it. So we're going to watch for input detected. So we used this before in the scene transitions for the main start screen. So we use it again here. So we're going to say input detected is going to be equal to false. So then those are our main variables. Now we need some, we have a serialized, which is going to be a checkbox that we're going to have in our inspector. And this is going to be called show run time. And when we check this off, it's going to basically play our timeline, or not the timeline, but it's going to play how long our scene's been running for, so we can see it. It's a debug flag. So it's a checkbox. You toggle it. It's going to show the runtime. You uncheck it, it'll disappear. And when you compile and distribute, make sure you don't have it checked, otherwise it'll be in your final product. You want that. And then we're going to have a float. Now these are going to be tracking for the fade delays. So one float called progress, one float called fade timer. This is going to keep track of where, and then a serialized field, and that's going to be a float, and we're going to call it fade delay. And we're going to initialize it to 5 seconds, so 5F. So we want our crossfade between the outside of the lab and our inside lab to be 5, and you can basically use whatever value you want by going from 5 seconds is pretty cool. So you can see it slowly, gradually change from one image set to another. And then the next we're going to do is 3 serialized, and these are going to be for our game objects so that we have easy access to them. So the first one is going to be the outside of the lab, basically that parent-child, that parent group. And then we're going to have a serialized field, a game object of the inside lab. And then we're going to have another serialized field of a game object, and this is going to be our player, so we can manipulate our player. And then we're going to have a public audio clip. You can use a serialized, but we're going to just keep it public as we did with the other one, with the main scene. And we're just going to call this music clip. And in the previous video, I basically initialized, we go back over to it, I initialized the main scene playing the music within the game manager. We're going to do it the other way in this video so you can see how you can do it in both ways. So in this one, we did it through our start main scene, which is called on scene loaded. And we started the music from here, but in this one, we're going to do it from our class that's tied to our actual scene. So you can see how we do both ways. And so that's music clip, and then we need the stuff that's on our canvas. So first one's going to be the text. We're going to call that runtime text. So runtime text. And the next one's the Text Mesh Pro GUI. And then we're going to call that TMP dialog text. So TMP dialog text. So the next we're going to do is an array of floats. The array of floats are going to be our 2 points of where we want our player to run, where we want to run into the scene or where we want to run back out of the scene. So we're just going to have those as floats. Just two, basically you can just think of them as 2 x coordinates. So we're going to say player run points. And we're just going to hard code these because obviously it's not going to really change because this is a storyline that's always the same no matter which way you play it. So the first one is where he runs into the scene. So he runs to 0.38 on the X into the scene. And where he actually starts, we know it was 2.45 when he's sitting outside underneath the black area. So those are our floats for our player run points. Then we need a float for music volume. Why do we need that? Well, we want to capture the current volume level of the music volume, and because we're going to fade out our music. So we want to capture that, and then we're going to use our, well, when we get to the fade, we use the same progress of the fade to apply to the music. So they fade out evenly together. And so that's the music part. So then what we need are our scene states. And the scene states, we're just going to keep them as private. I know sometimes I mix between public and private. Well, this is private. We don't care. We don't want anything to manipulate them. It doesn't really matter. Unless you write the code to do it, it won't actually happen. So intro states. So our first one is going to be, called outside lab. That's where we start. And then we're going to do a screen fade, first screen fade. And then we're going to go, and then our next state, we're inside the lab. And I cannot type that all in. Side lab. Okay, so outside lab, screen fade, out inside lab, and then screen fade 2, and then next scene, like we did with the scene transition video. And then we're going to say intro states, intro state, just take out the S. So intro state is going to be equal to, where do we start? We're going to be starting on outside the lab. That's where we start. And then, I know there's one more set of variables, and this is our dialog strings. So string array, we're going to call this dialog strings. So dialog strings. All right, so our strings are just basic strings. We're just going to use indexes to get to each one of them. So there are actually, let me count them out here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's actually 7 of them. So the first one is going to just say, you can put whatever you want. This is your, this is your story. You can make anything you want, but this is for this video. This is what I'm saying. So sometime in the future, and then our next one, I'm just going to put 5 more after that. 3, 4, 5. May need another one actually. Then we're going to say Dr. Light's lab. So that's going to go, it's going to start there, then it's going to say this, Dr. Light's lab. Then we're going to have actual conversation. And then we're going to say Dr. Light. And then it's going to new line, tab indent. We say Mega Man, come over here, please, because he's very polite. And then he's going to say, Dr. Light's going to say again. And then he's going to, there is a disturbance highway, which we know there isn't, but we're just going to say that there is, just to get Mega Man to go there. And then Dr. Light is going to say, I need you to investigate. And our good friend Mr. Mega Man, he's very polite as well. He's going to say, of course, you the boss. He's going to leave right away. And then our last one is, because we're very polite in this game, and then Dr. Light's going to say thank you to Mega Man. So there, that's our dialogue. Hopefully I don't have any typos, and if I do, no problem. You see what they are and you can fix them yourself. So we start with sometime in the future. These two are on the outside of the outside lab part. So sometime in the future, and then it's going to say Dr. Light's lab. And then when it transitions into inside the lab, Dr. Light's going to say, Mega Man, come over here, please. And he's going to tell him there's a disturbance at the hideaway, that he needs him to investigate. Mega Man's going to respond, of course, I'll leave right away. And Dr. Light's going to say, thank you, Mega Man. And then Mega Man's going to run off out of the scene. All right. So that is all for the variables that we need. So then we're going to create our good old awake function so that we can capture the we're going to capture the texts and the text. I was thinking the canvas, basically the canvas stuff, basically. So runtime text is going to be equal to finding the game object. And then we're going to be looking for runtime. But we are going to get the component, and that's text. We want the text component of that, because that's where all the manipulation is. And then we want TMP dialog text, and that's going to be a game object find. And we're going to be looking for dialog text this time. And then we're going to get the component on that as well, and that's going to be for the Text Mesh Pro. Text Mesh Pro GUI. Okay. And then now that we have those, and what we're going to do is just to be safe, you never know, you might forget something inside of the inspector. We're going to say dialog text. We're going to make sure that it is definitely starting empty as an empty string. So we do not want any kind of player input in this animated story. So the way we've done it like before with everything else, and all the other videos, we use our freeze input, which is what we made changes to earlier. So we're going to call the player controller, and then we're going to say freeze input, and we're going to say true. So we're freezing the player input. Our player cannot do anything with Mega Man while he's on the screen. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use a for each, and we're going to capture the transform on all the children inside of our inside lab. So you're going to, for each child's transform in inside lab transform. So now this is how we can get all of our children there. And so we're going to say child dot game object dot get component, and then we're going to access the sprite renderer on each of those. And in our sprite renderer, we're going to change the color. We're going to basically set them all transparent. We're going to use color.clear. So we're going to turn all of our inside lab items to transparent. So I don't remember what was in there. I have to go look. Inside lab. So inside lab, so the black background is going to go transparent. Dr. Light's going to go transparent, and this background here is going to go transparent as well when we start. So let's save that. So that's how we start out. Now what we're going to do is when our thing actually starts, we're going to say start time is going to be equal to time.time. Now we've captured the time. And if you hover over this, it's the time at the beginning of this frame. It's the time in seconds since the game started. So we're capturing when this whole thing started. We need this to be able to calculate how long it's been running for and use our time functions. So now we're going to start the music from here. So the other one, we did it from the game manager. We're going to be starting it from here. So we're going to use music source, clip, and our clip is our music clip, which we already set. We're going to set through the inspector. And then the sound manager, instance, music source, and what we're going to do is we're going to set our volume to 0.753 quarters. You can set it to 1 if you'd like, but we're going to do 3 quarters. And then we're going to say sound manager instance.music, and then we're going to say loop is equal to false. So we don't loop this. Doesn't matter. It's going to fade out before it even gets to that point, but I'm just going to set it anyway just so you can see. And then sound manager dot instance music source play, and then we're going to play it. So now we're going to have our music playing at the start. So now we're going to go down to update. In update, this is where all the fun stuff happens. So as each frame goes, each update, we're going to say runtime is going to be equal to time.time minus when we started. This is how we know how long it's been running for. So it's constantly updating runtime. How long has it been running for? How long has it been running for? How long is it running for? And then what we're going to do is we're going to be using our runtime text dot text is going to be equal to, and this is where our checkbox comes into play. So show runtime. Is it checked or is it not checked? It's a Boolean, remember. So string dot format. And then what we're going to say in here is runtime colon 0 colon 0.00. We're going to format it so we get seconds dot milliseconds. And then we're going to pass it runtime because that's what's got the current, how long it's been running for. And then otherwise, if it's not checked, if this is not checked, we obviously don't want to show anything. So we're just going to say nothing. So the string will be empty, so therefore you won't see anything. Okay. Now here, I'm probably going to come back to this part, but we'll fill in the basic real quick. So we're going to be looking for input.anyKey. So input.anyKey. So if a player presses any key, and then we're going to say if, obviously, if input detected has not been pressed yet, we'll add to this if at the end, because I want you to see first Let's go down. If input done 18. Okay, so if no. So we're going to say input detected is going to be true because we only want this to happen one time. All right. We'll come back and finish that off in the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch on our intro state. Our intro state is going to determine where we are in the scene. So we have several five, I can't remember how many cases. I think we have 1, 2, 3, yeah, we have 5 different cases here. So first case is when we're outside the lab. Our second case is going to be our first screen fade. Oops. Our next case is when we're going to be inside the lab. Our case after that is going to be when we're doing our other screen fade, second screen fade 2. And our last case is going to be when we're going to the next scene. So the next scene. So these are our states while we're inside of this scene. We're going to fill in the last one first, since we did that in the other video, so it's very straightforward. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say if it's not called yet, if we haven't called next scene, called for the next scene, and that should be a not. If it has not been called for yet, then what we want to do is call it. So we're going to say game manager instance, and then it's going to be call, what is it called? Oh, start next scene. So start next scene. And then we're going to set call to next scene to true, so we don't, this only happens the one time, because this repeatedly goes over and over, and it's possible it can happen more than once. We don't want that to happen. So then we're going to start at the beginning. So outside the lab, now we get to finally use our time functions. So the way we do this is all timing, how you want things to, I mean, what I can suggest is do like a storyline, draw it out, write it down, cut out pieces of paper. This is what you want to happen and where you want it to happen and what time and when it happens. What time do you want it to happen at? So we're going to say if utility functions in time, and this is where our current runtime. So what we're going to do is at 2 seconds in, we're going to use the text mesh pro dialog text, and then we're going to say dialog strings index 0. So what's the first one? The very first one was sometime in the future. So it's going to show the lab, there's nothing there, and then it's going to show after 2 seconds, it's going to show sometime in the future. So maybe I haven't been putting comments until the end in all the code that I upload, so we're just going to say sometime in the future so you can see what's going on. So that's at 2 seconds. Then at 5 seconds, which is going to be 3 seconds after this, so we're going to say if utility functions dot in time, and then runtime, oops, at 5 seconds. So at 5 seconds, we're going to play the other string. So we can just copy this. We're going to say, and then that second string was actually, it says Dr. Light's lab. So we're going to say that. So that's at 2 seconds, or at 5 seconds. Now, after we want this to play for 3 seconds, so that would mean at 8 seconds, that's when we want to switch. So we're going to say, so we're going to switch to screen fade. So if utility in time runtime 8.0f, and we're going to change our intro state to be equal to screen fade 1. So we're going to switch to screen fade 1. So next time it comes through, it's going to come down to here. Now this is where we want the fade to happen. So this is where this is kind of the fun part. So we're going to say progress. So calculation. It's like lerp. We're going to basically like do a time of lerping. We're not going to actually use lerp. So you can, you know, one of the things I think I've always forgotten to mention this in the videos is when you're going from one coding thing to another, it's like you're so used to like click a button, something happens. Do this, something happens. They call it event-driven programming. Well, doing everything in real time, it really kind of throws you for a loop if you've been doing that event-driven programming for a long time, and now you're kind of gotta start thinking everything in real time. It kind of like throws you for a loop at first. So you get used to it after a while. So all these time functions, you got to remember each time it keeps running through the update and it keeps calculating something different. So you get used to it after a while. So that's probably one of the hardest things of going to like game programming from like doing just regular developing, building websites or whatever. That's like one of the hardest things I felt, you know. So So our progress is going to be our fade timer of 0. So we're going to clamp it between 0 and the fade delay. And then we're going to divide it by the frame delay or the fade delay. So it's always going to be between a value of 0 to 1. Because obviously fade delay divided by itself is going to be 1. So it's always going to be between 0 and 1. So it's like lerp. So it's a percentage. So it's a percentage of where you are from A to B or A to Z or whatever. So in this case, we're going to say progress. So this is going to be between 0 and 1 every time this runs until we finally hit the end. And the way we get it to keep moving forward is what we're going to say is fade timer is going to be equal to time.delta time. So we're going to keep adding on delta time to it. So then what we're going to do is inside of here, and I forgot what I was saying because I got distracted. I had to pause right there. For each, right. So in the for each, what we're going to do is we're going to do the transform. We're going to do the same thing like we did earlier in the awake function, I believe it was. We're going to say transform child inside lab dot transform, and we're going to say child dot game object dot get component sprite renderer, and we're going to access the color, and we're going to say new color, and we're going to say 1, 1, 1, 1, progress, the alpha component. So this is going to be going from 0 to 1. So our progress is 0 to 1. So this basically is going from faded out and it's going to start fading in. So we're fading in all of the inside lab items, which happen to be on a higher layer than the outside lab items. So they're going to blend in above them. So then what we're going to do is the dialog text. And let me see the color on that is going to be equal to a new color. And what we're going to do with the color text, or the color component on the text, is we're going to say 1, 1, 1, and then we're going to fade that out. So we're going to do the opposite. So we're fading in the lab, but we're fading out the text. And to do the fade out, because we know this is going to be going from 0 to 1, we're going to say 1 minus that. So 1 minus the progress. But what we're going to do is we're going to make it go a little bit faster. So we're going to multiply it by 1.5. So it goes like 1.5 times faster. So the text will fade out faster than the background fading in by 1.5 times. And so that's a little bit of a trick right there. So now we're going to fade out the text. So we're going to check if the progress is greater than or equal to 1, which basically means it's hit the end of the line of the equation up here. And then we're going to say dialog text. Even though it's transparent, we're going to remove it. We're going to clear it out. Then we're going to set it back to white, so it's no more, it's not going to be transparent anymore, but because it's empty, it doesn't really matter. So dialog text color is going to be equal to color white, so we set it back to solid. And then we're going to change the alignment, because originally when we set up the scene, we said that the text was centered. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to be moving the alignment on it to the left top. So we're going to say dialog text dot alignment is going to be equal to the text alignment options, and it's going to be top left. So we're moving the alignment on the text to top left for that box. And then we're going to switch, so we're going to say intro state is going to be equal to inside the lab, so that we switch now to down here. So let's save that. So while we're inside the lab, what we want to do, having, you could play the timelines. This takes, this is 5 seconds, right? This is supposed to be a 5-second count, 5-second fade plus that's 13. So what we're going to do down here about 1 second after that, so starting at 14, so if we wanted 14 seconds here, so in time, runtime, and we're going to say 14.0f. So at 14 seconds in our timeline, we're going to do a dialog text. So I'm just going to copy this over here. Should just copy the other part too, and this is going to be 2, I believe. So that's where Dr. Light asks Mega Man to come over. So that's when Dr. Light asks Mega Man to come over. And then what we'll do we're going to leave that on the screen for 3 seconds, and then at 17 seconds in, we're going to remove the dialog. So remove dialog. And to do that, we're just going to null this out. So then what we're going to do is these have been at this specific time. At 14 seconds, do something. At 17 seconds, do something. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use a range. So we're going to say for here, Mega Man is going to run into the scene. Run into scene. So Mega Man is going to run into the scene. And if utility functions in time, and then we're going to say runtime, and then we're going to go between 17 and 20. So within a 3-second range, we're going to have him running. Now, you might not take all 3 seconds to run, but that's what we're going to check here. So if our player's transform position x is greater than or equal to, and then we're going to use that array of numbers that we had before. So he's obviously to the right, so his x is definitely greater than our first run point, which was 0.38, I think. So he's definitely greater than that. So if he's greater than that, we want him to start running. And then we'll just put that here. So we want player, get component, player controller, and then we're going to use those functions that we created earlier. So we're going to say simulate move left. We want him to run left. So during this 3 seconds, if his x is greater than this value, it's going to be as if we're holding down the left arrow key, and he's going to start running left. So if it's now not this, so the else condition is going to be where he stops. So he's going to move stop. So he's no longer going to move. So he's just going to stay there. So he's run, he hits the X where we want him at, and then he's going to stop. And then it's going to stay, and at 20 seconds, it'll stop running this bit of code here. So And then what we're going to say is Dr. Light, he talks about the disturbance. So that's what we're going to do is we're just going to copy this because there's a lot of repetition. And so at what time we're going to do that? We're going to do that at the 20-second marker. So when he'll stop running before that, but because he doesn't really run all that far, and it doesn't take 3 seconds to get from here to over here. So at 20 seconds, then he's going to talk about string index 3. And then we'll copy this. And then let's see. Then at 24 seconds, we say, and then Dr. Light's going to tell Mega Man to go check it out. And then that's at index 4, I believe. And then Mega Man's going to respond now. And that will do 4 seconds. So we'll say that's at 28, and that's going to be index of 5. And then last one, I think, for the dialogue, and then Dr. Light thanks Mega Man. So that's going to be at 32. So another 4 seconds. Let these strings stay on there for 4 seconds to give the person a chance to read them. So that would be number 6. And then what we're going to do then is we're going to remove the dialog, which we have over here. We're just going to copy that. So we're going to take out the string. And we're going to do that at 35. So we're going to leave it on there for about 3 seconds and remove the dialog. So then what we're going to do is we're going to have Mega Man run out of the scene. So we can copy this bit here. I'm going to change it up. So Mega Man runs out of the scene. And so we're going to do that between, let me see, where do I have that going? We're going to do that between 32. So 32 and 35, so another 3 seconds, 35. And then we're going to say if Mega Man's less than or equal to where he's at now, or where we want him to be. So he's obviously less than the 2.45. So we want him now, we're going to have him run right. Within this 3 second span, we're going to have him running right. And if he gets to this position, then he'll stop moving, but he'll be underneath of the black bar. And so then what we're going to do is that we're going to switch to the other screen fade. And then we're going to say if utility functions in time, and then we're going to say runtime, and we're going to do that at 36 seconds in. And then we're going to call a function that we haven't created yet. And the reason we're doing this in the function is because this is where the press any key is going to come into play too. So the code that we put here would be the same that we end up using up here in the any key and input detected part. So we're just going to leave this here for now. And then we're going to say in the screen fade 2, we're going to pretty much copy this stuff here. And I'm just going to let's copy up to this point here because a lot of this is the same. And so what we're going to do is fade timer 0 delay. Okay, so that's the progress add on. And then inside here, let me see, is it the child of the inside lab? Yeah. So now inside the lab, what we're going to do is we're going to say we faded in before, now we're going to fade out. So we're going to go from 1 to 0. So as progress increments, 1 minus that will eventually become down to 0. So we're going to fade out this scene. We're going to fade out the lab area. And then what we're also going to do is, while that's fading out, we're going to say sound manager.instance.music source.volume. We're going to fade out the volume on the music. And we don't have this value yet. We're going to be getting that. So music volume times 1f minus the progress. So the music is going to fade out too. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check if the progress is greater than or equal to 1f. And if it is, then what we're going to do is we're going to just make sure that the sound manager music source volume is completely 0. And we're going to change our screen intro state to next scene. So we're done. So we're going to move on to the next scene. Okay, so we have this, and now what we're going to do is we're going to create this function outside of all that called the init scene exit. So we're going to say private void init scene exit. Now inside of init scene exit, first we want to reset our fade timer back to 0 because at the other point it had already incremented, so we need to go back down to 0 so we can use it again and increment the delta time. So we're going to set it to 0. Then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our text is nothing, because when we press any key, we're kind of basically going to have it hop to the screen fade 2. So where the screen fade 2 appearance and everything looks like, we're going to be basically jumping to that point as well. So we need to set that to nothing, because when it gets to that point, there is nothing on the screen. And then we're going to say outside the lab, we're going to say set active to false. So the lab is basically going to be completely gone. It's going to be hidden underneath. So when our top layer of our inside lab fades out, obviously it won't be showing the outside lab underneath of it because we're going to basically hide it. So it's basically already covered up by the inside lab. So we're going to basically deactivate it so it's not there anymore. And what we're also going to do is we're going to set our player. We're going to hide him too, even though he's kind of like covered up, but we're just going to get rid of him as well, just to be safe. And so our player is gone. And then what we're going to do is we're going to capture the music volume. And that's just going to be sound manager instance music source volume. So you're just going to get the current value of the volume. So, and then we're going to say intro state going to be equal to intro states dot screen fade 2. So we call this, if we press any key, and then it'll basically run all this and jump the screen fade, which is basically the end. And if it gets down to this point after the whole interchange between Dr. Light and Mega Man, it's going to do it as well. So now that we have this function, we're going to jump back up here and we're going to call it after the in this input detected thing. So we're going to just say init screen exit. Boom. So this will, if you press any key, then it's going to basically say, hey, go jump to the fade screen 2. Now the thing about this is we only want this to happen if it's not already in screen fade 2, because if you do it when you're in screen fade 2, it's going to screw everything up. It's going to just come out wrong. So what we're going to do is we're going to say intro state is not equal to screen fade 2. So if we are not in that state and we haven't pressed any keys, then we want to be able to jump to the end. But if we're already in the screen fade 2, then we don't want to do it because you're already at the point where you want to be anyway, to exit out of it. So we're going to save that. That is basically our script. And it doesn't look like a whole lot, but it does a lot of cool stuff. So now we're going to go back over to Unity. And then we can just move this out of the way for right now. And then we're going to go to our intro scene here. And fade delay is 5. Now outside the lab is this game object, so we're going to drop that there. Inside the lab is this game object here. Our player is there, and our music clip, if we go into our music folder, is Yesterbreeze. drop that there. So that's all set. We're going to try this out. Go to the game manager though. Let's just make sure it's set on game state of intro scene, just so that it knows, hey, that's where we are. We're going to come down here and let's just play it. Let's just make sure everything works the way it's supposed to work. We can save that and run it. If I didn't make any mistakes, it should work. So it comes in. Yep, there's something. Yeah, so I think I boo-booed, and the canvas, the dialog text, it should start centered and in the middle, I believe. So let me save that. Run it again. Let's just make sure that should be good. There we go. That looks better. And then we should get our screen fade. It fades out the text. It fades in the inside lab. Done. Mega Man should run up. Oh! I forgot what I did on that. Okay, so ground. What layer is that? That's the ground layer, right? Duh. All right. So let's try it again. And you can actually see there's Mega Man hiding behind the black bar sitting on her because there's his ground collision stuff, his debug lines. So now Mega Man should come over. There he is. Stop. Dr. Light. It's going to say some stuff. He's going to tell him to investigate. Mega Man's going to reply. He'll leave right away. And Dr. Light's going to thank him as he's running off. So let's both play at the same time. And there he stopped over here. He got removed from the scene. The background was removed from the scene as well. And now this scene faded out. And there you go. So that is our intro. But now what we're going to do is we're going to do the run. Let's play it again. We're going to try the key press thing and see what happens. So key press also works if you do click a mouse. So I'm just going to let it get to here and I'm going to click. And there it jumps to the end. So that's basically the screen fade out to it jumped to that. So we'll play it. Now we're going to play it one more time. And we're going to see the timeline thing. If I can get this to go down. And now if you check this, there's your runtime. And you can see your timeline. So you can see where you can plan things out. If you play it through and it's like 11 seconds, this isn't that great. So 14 seconds. 17, it disappears, it runs in. 20. 24. 28. At 32, I believe. And it runs off, thank you. And then at 35, fade out. And that should run for 5, approximately. There. So that's how I do timelines and animated storytelling. Now, if you have the Unity timeline tool, you can take a stab at trying to use that. I don't know how you get the physics to work. Like if you have Mega Man want to jump, you got to approximate it. I don't know. Or use a signal, which basically is the same thing as I did with simulating. I really don't know because I never really got that deep into it. But I find even though this may take longer to build out a timeline because you're doing, checking does it work, and you keep playing it over and over. You don't have like a scrubber to go back and forth to see what it looks like. I find this easier in my opinion, and maybe you do, maybe you won't. I don't know. But this is the way we're going to do it with our Mega Man. And we're going to basically do it through a time, and we're going to call things that happen along that time, which is very similar to a timeline tool, doing it with the timeline tool anyway, because you're basically saying what you want stuff to happen at certain times. It's just you have a nice little graphical way of doing it. In this case, we don't. We build it through code only. So that is the for our intro. Now we have one more. Now this is a self-contained scene. So there's it's all the animation, nothing happens. If I really wanted to beef this thing up, I would probably have these little I would make these little parts animations so they go up and down and seeing this little I guess, battery indicator, it almost looks like, go, decrease 1 during the time, and maybe this thing starts spinning around and maybe some stuff pop up on the computer screen. You create little animations for those and create game objects out of them, drop them into the scene at locations, and then they can play throughout the scene as well. So it gives the scene some sort of a life. It has its own life. So right now it's kind of just static, but that's what you could do to beef it up. And if you watched my Halloween one, you saw there are bats flying in the background. There's flapping back their wings and everything. That originally was just static, and I cut the bat out, created a second version with the wings in a different position. I created animations and just dropped them in the spots, so the bats are always flying. So it gave your background animation, it gave it a life. And if you were to play Street Fighter, when they're fighting, you see in the background crowd, they're into it. So it's the same deal. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the main scene. So I'm going to get this out of the way. Now we're going to move over to the main scene. So go to scenes and main scene. So now in the main scene, we need to add in Dr. Light. He has a hologram. We're going to pretend he's a hologram of Dr. Light. So I'm going to bring this over. You're going to go over into graphics, and if I really wanted to trick out Dr. Light and make him a hologram, I'd probably have him flicker here and there, but we're just going to make him solid and change his color and make him a little translucent. And he's still going to be just a sprite. He doesn't have any rigid bodies or anything attached to him. So we're going to drop in Dr. Light. We're going to put him just up underneath the player here. And let me see what we need. So for Dr. Light, we're going to, let me bring this over so we can see. We're going to have Dr. Light, we're going to have him standing over here in front of this crate right before we get to our fictitious checkpoint. So his location in that regard is going to be 8.5 on the X, and his Y, because we're using the physics and we want to replicate, it's going to be a real big ugly number again, because that's where Mega Man ends up landing when his box collider and everything's touching the ground. So negative 1.13947, a really ugly number. So he's right down there, but once again, he needs to be on layer 10, so he's in front of everything. We also need to flip his X, so he's there, and we're going to change his scale to 1.5 on the X and the Y. So there's our Dr. Light. Now we're going to change his color, so we're going to go over to color here, and I've already kind of toyed around with it, kind of using this the cyan color over here. So we're going to change his red component to 50, so he's got this blue tint about him. And then what we're going to do is we're going to change the alpha to like 145. So now he's you can see through him, and he's bluish, so he kind of looks like a little bit like a hologram. So then we can close that. So here's our Dr. Light. So that's what we're going to do with him. Then what we need are canvas. We're going to add on to our canvas, and that's going to be under the HUD canvas. We're going to do the runtime thing again, adding in the runtime text so that so you can see it and watch the timeline as it goes. And we're also going to add in that black box that you saw where the dialog happens. So first, we're going to right-click on HUD canvas, and we're going to go to UI, and we're going to add text. And then this text is going to be called runtime. And I'm just going to move this up to there. Excuse me. Okay, now the anchor, we're going to move the anchor to the bottom center, so Alt and bottom center. We're going to change the coordinates on it, I believe. Yes, we are. So the Y is going to become 30. The width and the height, it's going to be 230. It's much like the other one. We're going to change the text to just 0.00, just to default it. Font's going to be Arial, it's going to be bold, we're going to set the size to 26, line spacing 1, rich text fine. It's going to be centered and in the middle, so we're going to do center and middle. And then we're going to change the color of it to all white. Yep. And we're going to add in a drop shadow. And then we're going to change the alpha on the drop shadow to the original alpha, so it's just solid black. So now if we bring this over, there it is. So this is going to be where our runtime is going to show up. So we're we're going to drop that. We're going to have that right there. The other one we're going to have is the dialogue between Mega Man and Dr. Light again. Now, to accomplish that, what we're going to do is we're going to add in an image, and it's just going to be a solid. So we're going to right click on the canvas again, and we're going to go to UI, and we're going to add in an image. So bring it over so you can see. So right now it just dropped this white square right here in the middle of the canvas. So we're going to trick that out a little bit. So we're going to call that dialog box by renaming it first. And so we're going to call it dialog box. And the dialog box, we're going to anchor it in the middle center of the screen. So we're just going to confirm. So hold down Alt, middle center, which it already is. Now the X and the Y position, the X is going to stay at 0. We're going to put the Y to 100. Maybe I should bring this over so you can see how to do it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and then the width and the height, we're going to say the width is going to be 600 and the height we're going to leave at 100. And then what we're going to do is this image component on here. What we're going to do is we're going to click on that and we're going to just make that all black. We're going to have white text on a black background. This thing will move. There we go. Boom. So there. That is our dialog box area that we're going to have that pops up on the screen. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to add a child to it. So get it out of the way. We're going to right click UI. We're going to add on text mesh pro text. And we're going to rename that to dialog text. Boom. And so dialog text, so we're going to anchor that, and let me just bring this over so we can see what's going on. We're going to anchor that in the top left, which is going to be the top left corner of our parent area. So 0, 0, whatever, it's going to be here. And so we're going to change the position to, let me see here, it's 10. We're going to change some things on that so it's going to actually line up better. And then -10. And then our width is going to be 580, so 20 minus, so 10 left, 10 right. Let me just actually do that real quick. I believe something. Yeah, something. Well, anyway, I might have to do this again in a sec. There we go. You have to do it after you set the. That's what's weird. Hold on a sec. It's not. This is the one thing I hate about this. Let me figure it out and I'll come right back. All right, my bad. So what you're going to do is actually when you click on this, you're going to hold down Shift and click. So it puts the pivot in the top left also. So if you do the anchor, it doesn't look right. But if you do Shift, so I'd probably say do the Alt and do the Shift. So and click it, and then you're going to change that to 10 and -10. So now it's right. So it goes down. Goes 10 to the right and bent down 10, and then when we set the width and the height, so you're going to say -10 from the left, -10 from the right, and then the height we said was the 100, so it's actually going to become 80. So -10 from the top, -10 from the bottom, and we said it was 100 height, so that's 80. So now it kind of lines up right. So then we're just going to say text for right now. We're going to change the font. And the font is going to be, just to play it safe, you're going to choose the one that's in the assets under Text Mesh Pro in case you ever want to use rich text on it. And then we're going to change the font size to 14. And colors it's already on white, which is cool. And we're going to say alignment on left and the top, which it already is. And then the rest of this is fine based off the shader properties and everything that we already defined for that font. So the rest of that's fine. So we're going to get rid of the text that's in it. Just nuke that out, and then we can save this just so we have that. So now we have our dialogue area for between Mega Man and Dr. Light. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to add in the code to our main scene to basically have our trigger happen and the other stuff that we have happen in this scene. So we can get this out of the way. We're going to go back over to Visual Studio, and then we're going to switch over to our main scene. And if you don't have it inside, you can basically go into your scripts folder here into scenes and open it up from there. So this is what we have so far. It's very basic. All I had was checkpoint reach, and this came from the scene transition video, I believe. So we're going to make some changes now. First thing we need to do is, like we did with before, since we're using string format, we need to import the system namespace. So we import system. We already have Text Mesh Pro, which is cool, but when we also using the canvas and everything, so we're going to be using Unity engine.ui. So now we have the engine UI. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have our start time and our runtime floats. So that's that. And then we're going to have our canvas objects. So we're going to have a game object for the dialog box. So we can access that, so we can turn it on and off. Then we need a text, which is going to be runtime text. And then Text Mesh Pro for the what was it? I'm having a brain fart. The dialog text, right? Dialog text. For our dialog text, they'll show up there, and then what we'll do is we're just gonna get rid of that, and then that other one for the screen message, which we have for a checkpoint reached. So then we're gonna have a serialized, much like we did before, and that's gonna be a bool for show runtime, and then we have our audio clip, which is fine being right there, our music clip. Then we need a serialized field for a game object, which is our player. So we can get a handle on Mega Man and be able to manipulate him around. And then our serialized field for another game object, which we're going to call hologram. It's going to be, you can call it Dr. Light if you want, but we're going to call it hologram. Then we're going to have a couple more serialized fields. And these are going to be floats, and these have to do with the coordinates. The coordinates of where, these are basically going to be like the trigger. The first one's going to be the trigger. The second one's going to be where he runs to. So when we get to this point in the scene, this x coordinate, this is where we're going to take control away from the player or from the user, and we're going to play our sequence out. So start begin point is going to be equal to 5.6f, and I've already calculated this out. So when Mega Man gets to this x coordinate, which is actually right past the second crate, when he gets there, we're going to take control, we're going to move Mega Man forward, and we're going to move him forward to this is going to be end. We're going to move him to this position, which is going to be 7.0. So we're going to make him run right to the 7, and so just so that Dr. Light is now visually in the camera view. So when he gets to 5.6, you don't see Dr. Light, and that's why I want it. So he stops, he sees him, and he's going to run forward to 7.0, and then he's going to have his dialogue with him. So those are those coordinates. So then we're going to have serialized fields for a game object, and this is going to be our left wall. So what we do, kind of like the doorway when you're going to battle a boss, right? It opens, Mega Man goes through with like a camera transition, and then he's not able to go back. Well, we're going to do the same thing with this. We're not going to have the door that opens up, but when he gets to that checkpoint, he gets in that checkpoint area, we're going to move our left wall to a certain position on screen so he can't go back out. So he's basically stuck. He's progressed forward and he's there. Now he can't get out of that. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to just get a handle to that so we don't have to go search it with the game object find. Then we're going to have game object, and this is going to be called checkpoint trigger. And this is going to be the actual trigger the box collider trigger so that we can basically, we want to turn that off so that once our walls move, we want to turn that off so it doesn't happen to be like right before, you know, so just so that it's not there anymore and it doesn't happen to spontaneously get touched somehow by some mysterious way and then have it do some kind of weird stuff. So we're going to turn it off. We're going to disable that trigger. And then we're going to do another serialized field, and this is going to be a float, and this is going to be wall left x position. And this is going to be 11.5, which is a nice number, which you figure out by moving the left wall with, you know, while you're doing your scene or whatever. So this is where we're going to move the wall to. And then we're going to have some states. So I have them as public, and I've already coded it out. It's already been uploaded like that. It's not a big deal for public, although, you know, technically, I guess they really should be. They should probably be private. And then level states. And our first state is we're going to be calling it just exploration. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it intro. You can call it beginning. You can call it whatever. I'm just calling it exploration. This is where Mega Man gets in the scene. He's exploring. He's going through the highways and he's working his way right. The next part's going to be called hologram. This is the interaction between Dr. Light and Mega Man. After the hologram animated sequence or whatever, we're just going to call it keep looking, just so that we're out of the hologram state and we move into something else. And it's like basically Dr. Light told Mega Man keep looking, so we're just going to call it keep looking. And then the next one after that is we're going to just call it checkpoint. And if we had a game end in, you know, battling a boss and all that, we'd add on to this, but we don't have any of that right now. So we're going to build this out later so we have boss fight and maybe, you know, battle some enemies before we get to the boss. So then we're going to say level states, and we're going to say level state, and we're going to initialize it to exploration. That's where we're starting with this. And we need some strings. So much like we did with the other one, we need to do some dialog strings. So string, dialog, what do I call it? Dialog strings. And on dialog strings, so we're going to have five strings for this. So I'm just going to do one. So it's going to start with Dr. Light. He's going to say -t. He's going to say Mega Man. I can't stay here long. And then why can't he stay there long? Well, that's going to be the next string. And he's going to say my hologram is very unstable. And then, let's see, then we're going to say, well, from Mega Man's going to say something now. And what is Mega Man going to say? Mega Man is going to say, Dr. Light, haven't seen any disturbance. Dr. Light is then going to say, there has to be something, keep looking. And then our last interchange between these two is going to be Mega Man. And what is Mega Man going to say? He's going to say, okay, I'll contact you soon. So this is the exchange that we're going to have between Mega Man and Dr. Light's hologram. So, excuse me. So now down here in the awake, we need to get some handles again. So first handle we're going to do is for the dialog box. And that's going to be the game object find. And then we're going to say dialog box. Oops. So we're going to capture get a handle to the dialog box, and then we're going to get a handle to the runtime text, and that's going to be game object dot find, and it's called runtime. And then we want get component of text, Unity's text, canvases, and there. Why is it still red? And then we want to handle to the dialog text. And then that's going to be game object. You know what I'm going to do here? I'm just going to copy this and change it. Paste that in there. What we're looking for is dialog text, and we're not looking for the text, but we're looking for text dash pro GUI, and that's what type of object that is. And then our screen message, which we already have, so we can nuke that. And then by default, we're going to just say dialog just in case. We're just empty out our dialog text, and we're going to hide it. The box, we're going to hide the box. Set active is false because we don't have dialog right away. When we want dialog, we'll activate the box. So by default, it's going to be closed. And in our start, we do nothing. And in our update, now we're going to finally have something. And we start out with runtime text. And you know what you can do, go over to your intro scene. Honestly, just copy this because it's the same exact thing. Copy the runtime text here that shows on the screen with the flag and everything, and just drop that in there. And I'll just wait here for a sec. You can pause it if you don't, you can type it out, or just copy and paste it. It's a lot easier. And then we're going to switch on the level state. And we have 4 states, I believe. We have case, exploration. Yeah, so exploration, hologram, keep looking, and checkpoint. In case of the hologram, we hit the hologram, and then the case of keep looking. And our last case, which is the checkpoint. Now, the thing about this is in keep looking at checkpoint, we actually really don't do anything in these. We're just having them as placeholders and for the future in case we do something. And so then what we're going to do with this is in exploration, we don't have any enemies. We don't have anything going on. The only thing Mega Man's doing is running through the scene. So while he's running through the scene, to start our animated story, we need to see if he hits that X coordinate, the sequence begin point. So what we want to do here is we want to check if the player is not equal to null. And the reason we do this is because if we did have enemies, see right now it's in this spot here, right? And if player is null, say he dies, then it's going to basically, so player.transform.position.x is greater than or equal to start sequence begin point. So if he gets past this point, which basically means now that's where we want to take over. So if we didn't have this in the null, for instance, and he dies, well, this is going to basically throw a big old error because there's no more player object. He just exploded, and so that's why we got to throw this in front of it. If he's not null, then we don't want to have an error there. So this is where now we've hit that point. This is where we want our start time to begin. Normally before in our anime, we started from the very beginning with the start time, but then when we get to this point in the sequence, that's when we want our start time to begin. That's where our timeline begins. So time.time. And then what we're going to do then is we're going to take away user input because we don't want the player to be or the person to be able to do anything while the sequence is playing. We're not going to let them do escape to get out of it. They have to watch this. It's part of the gameplay. If they want to skip the beginning, like the little story in the beginning, that's one thing, but they're not going to be able to escape out of this. So freeze input is going to be true. So keyboard or touchscreen stuff, if you actually had touchscreen stuff, we could probably disable that, hide it from the screen as well if you wanted. as an example, but we're just gonna we'll deal with something like that later. Now vector2, and then we're gonna say player velocity is gonna be, what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the current player velocity. So player velocity is going to be equal to player dot get component, and then we're going to say the rigid body to get the velocity, rigid body 2D. So we want to capture the current velocity, because what we want to do is we want to stop moving X but let the Y go through. So if they happen to jump or if they're walking, we're going to let the Y play out but the X stop from going forward. So we need to get the current velocity. So the player dot get component of rigid body, and then we're going to set the velocity is going to be equal to a new vector2, and it's going to be 0, and player velocity dot y, I believe. Let me see. Yep. So we're going to create a new vector with nothing on the x and only keep the y, and then the x is going to not move forward anymore, and the y is going to finish out until he touches the ground, because you know he's going to end up being on top of a box. Well, you'll see it. So then what we'll do then is we're going to go to the next level state, and the level state is going to be our hologram. So this is where our where our animation starts playing out. So inside of here, while our hologram is going on, we're going to say runtime is going to be equal to time.time minus the start time. Start time. So there. So what do we want to have happen? Well, when he gets here in exploration, he stops, and then we want him to move forward. So we're going to say if utility in time runtime, and we're going to have it do for this. So we're going to have him start at 2 seconds. So he's going to stop there for a sec, and you're not going to see anything, and he's going to start moving forward. So it's like, oh, there's Dr. Light. Kind of like shocked that Dr. Light's hologram is there. And so within here, we're going to say if the player transform position X is less than or equal to start, and this is going to be the end point. So this is like he's stopped at the first point. Now he's going to run to the next point. So he's obviously less than that for right now. So we're going to say player get component, player controller, and then we're going to simulate running right. So simulate running right, because he's going from a scene from left to right, and now he's going to run right. And then else, we're going to have him stop as soon as he makes it to that second point. So let's just copy that, drop that in there, and we're going to say move stop, so he doesn't move anymore. He's just going to stop right there. So this is the first one. So we're going to player runs until it's stop point. So that's that. So now we're going to go after that. Now we're going to do some dialogue again. So the first one we're going to say is Dr. Light, he can't stay long. So if utility, I'm going to end up copying after this. So runtime, we're going to have that start at the 5-second marker. And you can toy around with this as much as you'd like. If you don't like the timelines I'm picking, you can try, toy around with it and just choose your own and add more to the dialogue if you'd like. So we're going to say dialog box set active. So we're going to have it show up now. And then we're going to say dialog text, and that's going to be equal to the dialog strings of 0. So we're going to show the dialog box and put in the first string. So then let's just copy this. On there. So now we're going to say Dr. Light is an unstable hologram. So this we can get rid of because we already have it active right now. But we're going to do the next string. So that's at 5, and this is actually supposed to be at 9. So we're going to leave the one on for 4 seconds, and then this one will show up. And then we're going to copy this. And this is going to be 4 seconds, so we're going to make this at 13. And this is where Mega Man says he doesn't see anything. So Mega Man says there is no disturbance. I can spell. And that's going to happen at 13, but that's going to be string index 2, not 21. And the next one is going to be at time index 17. So we're going to do that at 17 for the next string, and that's going to be Dr. Light says keep looking. And we put the comments so we can see what's going on. So you watch and read through this and you'll know exactly what's happening. And that's going to be string index of 3. And then Mega Man says he'll contact Dr. Light. So then we're going to drop that in. So we'll say Mega Man says he'll contact Dr. Light. And that's going to be at 21. So 4 seconds. We're going to leave each of these strings on the screen for 4 seconds before we move on to the next string. So that's at 21. Now at 24, so we're going to leave that on for 3 seconds this time. So we're going to say at 24, right? Yep. And we're going to say run in time 24. We're going to say hide the dialog box. So we're going to hide dialog box. And then here we're going to just say dialog box dot set active false. So we're going to hide the dialog box. And before we hide the dialog box, we will also dialog text. We're going to set it to nothing. So we're going to get rid of the string and hide the box. All right, so then we're going to flicker out Dr. Light's hologram. And to do that, we're going to use a coroutine for that. And so what we'll say here is flicker out Dr. Light's hologram. And so we'll say if utility in time, and we're going to say runtime, and we're going to do that at 25 seconds. So at 25 seconds, we're going to say start coroutine, and we're going to call a coroutine that we have not created yet. And it's going to be called flicker out hologram. There. So we're going to do that there. And then what we're going to do at basically the hologram flickers out. If you play it first time through and then we do all this, and you'll see it kind of stops around 27.5 seconds where the hologram's gone. So we say that's how the runtime debug thing really comes in handy. So then at this point, we're going to say give control back to the user and move to the state. So if utility dot in time, and then what we're going to say here is runtime at 28 seconds. So 27.5, we'll just say at 28. We're going to give the player control back. So player dot get component, and that's player controller. And that's going to be freeze input is going to be false. Freeze false. So we want them, it's not going to be frozen anymore. And then what we're going to do then is level state. We're going to change level state to keep looking. So then we're going to move on to keep looking. And then after that, these two, they don't really do anything because we had other stuff than we would do some stuff. So we're going to save that. So we're going to create that cool coroutine of Dr. Light, basically flickering out and disappearing from the screen. So we're going to create a private enumerator, and it's called flicker out hologram. So how are we going to achieve this? So what we're going to do is, because we manipulated the sprite's color properties and everything like that, we need to know what those properties are, because we have to basically end up creating a new color and this and that. So what we're going to do, we don't want to do that. So we're just going to say hologram color. We're going to create a variable called hologram color. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do two floats, and we're going to call one delay 1. That's going to be equal to, and I've toyed around with these values to see what looks pretty cool with the flickering out. So this is going to be 0.15 for the first one, and the next one, the second delay, we're going to call it delay 2, and it's going to be a lot faster than the first one. We're going to say it's 0.025. So those are our two delays. So the first thing we want to do is get the current hologram color, and the way we're going to get the color is we're going to say hologram, because we expose that through the serialize so we have access to it. And what we're going to do is we're going to get the component from the sprite renderer. So the sprite renderer. And so we're going to get color. So we're going to get the current color from the hologram so we can keep using that. So we're going to flash them on and set it back, flash off, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we're going to do first is int I is equal to 0, and then I is going to be less than, we'll just say, we're going to have the first flashing 5 times, and then I plus, and so we're going to say hologram dot get component sprite renderer, and then the color is going to be equal to color dot clear. So we're going to make it transparent, and then we're going to say yield return, can't spell at all, yield return new wait for seconds, and then that's going to be the first delay. And then what we can do is we're going to copy this, drop it in again, but then this time we're going to reset it back to the hologram color. There. So it's going to do this, it's going to clear, go back, clear, go back, clear, go back. It's going to do that 5 times on this delay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to copy this, and we're going to drop that in there, and then we're going to do this one 10 times. So we're going to run the faster one 10 times, and it's going to be the same deal, but except it's not going to be delay 1, we're going to do it at delay 2. And so that's going to go, it's going to flash even faster. And then by the time all these coroutines going to come back and forth, we're going to just take him out of the scene. So we're going to destroy the hologram, because we're not going to use him again. He's gone. He's phased out. He's out of the scene. He's gone poof. So this is our flicker out hologram coroutine. So very simple, and we call it right here. And at this point in the timeline, it's going to flicker out, and about a half second after he's done flickering out, if you watch it and you step through it, you'll see it's about 28 seconds, and then we're going to give the player back control and switch to the keep looking state. And so then what we're going to do is we're going to go to our checkpoint. Well, the player can go left, which, he can go left, and then he can go right. If he goes right, obviously this is not going to be called again because we're no longer in the exploration state. So it's not like Dr. Light's going to come back and have that whole exchange again. We're out of that phase, that state of this scene. So we're going to move on. And so there's really nowhere to move on except to go right. So eventually the player's going to jump on top of the crate and then jump onto the next part of the broken highway. And what happens there is we already have a checkpoint reached function get called on our camera transitions. I think it was a post delay. So what we're going to do in checkpoint reached is after our coroutine gets called, which is this, it's going to show it on the screen, make it go poof after 5 seconds. What we're going to do here is we're going to change our level state to checkpoint. We're going to go to checkpoint. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say vector3, and then we're going to call it wall pause. We need to get the current position of the left wall. And the left wall is, let me see if I can bring this over. The left wall that we're going to end up using is, let me see here, where's that at? Walls, boundaries, right here. This left wall here. This is the boundary that we're going to move. So we're going to actually take this and we're going to move its position over here so it blocks in the player so they can never get back over to this side after they made it into this checkpoint area. So wall position. So what we need to do is get the current wall position. So wall left dot transform dot position, just so that we have the y and the z coordinates because we're going to manipulate the x. So let's get the current position of that wall over there. And then what we're going to say is wall pause x is going to be equal to what? Well, our new wall left position, which is the one that we have in the inspector, and we defined it to be 11.5. And then what we're going to do is we're going to, so now we manipulate it. So it's got the same y, the same z, and it's got a new x. So we have this new vector that we're going to apply to our left wall. Transforms position, and it's going to be equal to wall pause. So wall pause, we just gave, now our walls, boom, just moved to our new spot. And then what we're going to do is our checkpoint trigger, checkpoint reached, but our checkpoint trigger, we're going to deactivate it. So we're going to set active to false. Now, I suppose you don't have to do that if you make your left wall go in front of it so Mega Man never touches it, but I'm just going to disable it. So you can see that's how you can disable the trigger. It's the same as disabling anything else. Just say set an active to false, and it'll basically toggle it off so it's no longer in the scene at all without destroying it. It's inactive. And those, I believe, are all the changes that we do to our main script. And I'm going to just check it real quick, and I think that is it. Do the strict there. Okay, so we're going to save that. We're going to go back over to Unity. We can move this out of the way for right now just so we can get to our main scene up here. So now you're going to see that our script has a whole bunch of other stuff in it. So what we need to do is assign all these things so nothing breaks. So the first thing is the player. Our hologram is Dr. Light. And we already have 5.6 and 7. Those are already set. Our left wall, which is the boundary. So this one, we're going to use that left wall. Our checkpoint trigger, which is in the transitions parent here, which is the third one, which is the one right before the checkpoints. That's highway 3. So I'm going to drop that in there. And we already have 11.5 there and level state exploration, which is fine. So now we're going to save that. And we're going to just make sure the game manager knows that it's on main scene, and it is. We're going to skip the first 2 scenes, and we're just going to start with this scene and see how it works out. So when it starts out, it's that. He comes in, but what we're going to do is let's turn this on. Now you're going to see it's not moving. Now this doesn't actually start the whole runtime thing until we make it to the hologram. So we'll just leave it on for right now. We're going to make it over to the hologram. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to jump around. Make it here, camera transition. And that first coordinate right here, 5.6, is right after the second crate. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come right here, and it's about right here-ish. So I'm just going to jump up, and you stop. So there's our runtime. And I'm going to hold down, I'm going to press left, I'm going to press right. I can't have no keyboard control. I'm just going to hold down my left arrow right now. And so now they're having their dialogue between each other, and Dr. Light's going to basically phase out now after this dialogue finishes. Our coroutine, there's our coroutine, he's gone, and then there, 28. So went to 28.02, that's where it stopped. So you can get rid of that. That was that time, delta time. So now, if I come over here, And you see it doesn't get triggered again. It's done. We're out of that exploration state that was looking for those coordinates. So I can basically, I've got nowhere to go over here anyway. I can't get back up top. So we already know that it stops right there because we already have that boundary. So I have nowhere to go but left. I mean, what right? Let's go to the right. And my checkpoint. So now before I do the checkpoint, I want to show you. So you see our dialog box here is inactive, and our input thingy here is inactive for all that. That's the file. So we're going to click left wall and highway 3. So you can see kind of. There's the left wall, and there's the trigger for highway 3. So I'm going to jump up here. And you see that trigger is going to disappear, and now our left wall is over here. So I made it to the checkpoint. We already know I can't go any further from the previous videos, but now if I try to go left, I can't go anywhere because my left wall is now blocking me in. So I'm in my checkpoint area, and that's that. So I felt that this was like one of the funner videos, I think, because we got to do a little bit of storytelling in it. And so now you've seen, I give you both ways you can do this. You can have a scene that's completely animated on its own, or you can do in-game play scene animation. Now, I just looked for an X coordinate. You could have a trigger do it if you want. There's all kinds of ways of doing it, but I was looking for an X coordinate. And if you work your way through a level, you can look for other X coordinates or Y coordinates too, or both X and Y's or a vector. If you get to a certain point, a certain vector, then you can have something happen. And so each thing you just consider it as a state of your scene. And then when you switch out of that state when it's over, you move on to a different state. So that brings us to the end. This is a very, very, very long video. It's I think going to be now the longest video I've done for the series and so far. And I think it was a lot of useful information. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to just switch the scene back over to the title scene, and this should basically play out through the game manager and shouldn't just move on, just to make sure everything's working right again. Press. It's going to go to our. Oh, ooh, look at that! It could not be loaded because very good. I'm glad this happened. Okay. So intro scene could not be loaded because it's not added to the build. So because you got to go to your build setting, go to File, Build Settings, and it's not an open scene. So what you can do is if you close out of that and double click it, I'm glad that happened. Go to intro scene here, and then go back to File, Build, add it. So now it's in there, but I would drag that after title. So title, intro, main, there. And now you can go back to title. It's because it doesn't know about it. I mean, it's there. You have it built, but it has no clue that it exists. So now it's part of the build settings. So now we're going to do it again. So now it should be okay. There. So now we're going to play out our animated story. Our music is playing. We're Dr. Light's lab. And they're going to have their exchange. And then Mega Man's going to run from behind that black bar, which is a total illusion. And then Mega Man will run away, and Dr. Light's going to thank him. And then the scene's going to fade out along with the music will fade out as well. And then it's going to go into our main scene. And now it's in the main scene. So that's our pure animation only cutscene, I guess you could say, intro animation. Now we're going to go over here. We're going to look for in-gameplay animated story. And which something will happen, make it cause it. So I'm going to go up here, jump, and jump. And then I'm going to run to my second coordinate. Have my exchange with Dr. Light. And one more dialogue after that. Alright, so now got getting out of control again. And I'm going to go up to my checkpoint. And now I'm blocked in. Can't go anywhere but right. But unfortunately, I haven't built out a right yet. So after this point, we'll probably have the boss fight. Or we'll have some enemies to the boss fight. I don't know. So we can stop there. And now we're really to the end of the video. So if you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. We're building up Mega Man little by little. And project source is up on GitHub. Check the description. I'm not sure what the next video is going to be, or for the next video, but check my Twitter. I'll probably post them once I have an idea what it's going to be. So stay safe out there. Happy 2021, first video of 2021, and I'll catch you at the next video.